Golf is loaded with jargon. So in this new series, I'm going to try to define lots and lots of terms that you may hear when you come across golf instruction or read reviews or read about golf equipment that are going to trip you up. And we're going to cover things from very, very basic all the way up to pretty complex stuff. So hopefully there's something here for everybody. We're going to start out with terms that just apply to golf clubs. And we're going to start at the very, very most basic. This is this whole thing. This is the golf club. This piece on the top here, the part that actually hits the golf ball, this is the club head. In this case, it would be an iron or a driver or a hybrid or a putter. In any case, these are all the club head. Now, the piece that connects the club head to your hands, the piece that actually it's the rest of the golf club, this is all the shaft. And then here is the grip. We're going to do a whole separate video on terms related to the shaft and the grip. But for right now, we're going to get back to focusing on the club head. The flat part of the club head that actually hits the ball, this is all called the club face. The part out on the edge here, we call the toe. This closer to the hosel, closer to the golfer, is called the heel. If you think about it like a foot, kind of makes sense. The heel is right underneath the shaft and everything else. The toe is here out on the extremity. If we look closely here, we can also see the face is covered in grooves. Grooves are something we talk about more with wedges, sometimes with irons, but they're largely responsible for getting junk away from the club face ball interaction so we can get more spin. Now in an iron, we would call this the top line. We'd call this a top line with a putter too, something like this. In a driver, however, we call this the crown. Now regardless of the club type, the part that sits on the ground is what we call the sole. The part of the club that connects the shaft to the club head, this is called the hosel. Now, in an iron or a wedge, you see it's got this little L shape. That's a traditional hosel, again, in an iron or a wedge. However, in most drivers and many woods and hybrids, we have adjustable hosels now. So the shaft has this adapter on it. The head has a hosel, but instead of gluing that together, we just place that in a particular position. There are lots of different positions depending on the brand, and then we use a torque wrench and we screw them together. Now, another term closely related to the hosel is offset. So offset, if we drew a line down here from the edge of the shaft straight down to the ground, that would be zero offset. Most clubs are pushed back slightly to help them launch a little bit higher and to help, in some cases, turn the ball over, make it easier to square the club face up. Again, most clubs have at least a little bit of offset. This is a player's iron, has very little offset, but here is an iron with a lot of offset. So you can see the difference there. Now, two terms you're going to hear a lot if you talk about club fitting are loft and lie. Talk about club specifications, you'll hear it there as well. The lie angle is the angle the shaft makes with the ground if the club is soled perfectly flat. So if we assume that this club is perfectly flat on the ground, this is the lie angle. So in a mid iron, that's going to be somewhere around 60 degrees. In a putter, it's going to be a little more upright. That would be a 90-degree lie angle, which is pretty extreme. That would be 0. Generally, the rule is the more loft a club has, the shorter the shaft, the more upright it is. The longer it is, the less loft it has, the more flat it's going to be, the more we're going to swing it around. And lie is something that can be adjusted to you. So there's not a standard or correct lie angle. It's just about fitting the right lie angle for your swing. Now again, assuming this club is perfectly soled flat on the ground, the next thing we want to talk about is the loft of the club. And that is this angle here, how much it points up at the sky. We can use this to illustrate that and make it a little easier to see. But this is, again, a mid-iron. This is going to have loft somewhere in the 30-degree range. A driver is going to have very little loft, 9 or 10 degrees usually. And our wedges are going to be our most lofted clubs. You can see this was a 50-degree wedge here, pointing a little higher to the sky when that club is soled perfectly flat. Now, there's one more angle I want to discuss here, and that's bounce. Bounce could be its whole own video. I'm not going to go super deep into the weeds. If you want to know more about bounce, let me know in the comments. I'll talk more about bounce. But we'll just keep it kind of basic for right now. If we put this club on a perfectly flat surface, this leading edge actually wouldn't touch the ground. So if we raise that perfectly flat surface up a little bit, the bounce angle would be this. I'm exaggerating quite a bit here. This would be like 45 degrees of bounce, what I'm making with my hand. But just for a visual reference, this would be the bounce angle. You can think of it as mirroring the loft. The loft points up this way, the bounce goes down this way. And the purpose of bounce is to keep the club from digging in the turf. We talk about bounce primarily with wedges, sometimes with irons, but that's partially because we swing our wedges most steeply, and so that turf interaction really matters. One thing to keep in mind, don't get too hung up on the pure bounce number, because you also have to factor in the width of the sole and the sole grind. You can have a club that measures high bounce, but it has a narrow sole and has a particular grind, and it actually plays very versatile. Similarly, you could have only 4 degrees of bounce, which is very, very low, but if the sole is wide and there's no grind on it, it might feel a little clunky in the turf and it might resist digging really, really well. Now, before I go any further, this is the part where I say, if you are enjoying the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We're going to do a lot more of these golf dictionary videos, and you will make sure that you see every one if you are subscribed. Our next set of terms are words that we use to describe types of irons, or types of clubs in general, but we're going to focus on irons. So that starts with blades. This is the most traditional iron there is out there. This is the old school iron. There's really nothing here to give you any forgiveness. It's just kind of flat and solid across the back. There is a little bit of shaping here. It's thicker down here than it is up here. But this is a blade, classic, very little technology, just you and the golf ball and a very simple instrument. This would be a cavity back. Now this is actually a couple different categories in one, but leave that aside. Let's just focus on this part here. This is the cavity back. This is the innovation that Karsten Solheim came out with for ping many, many years ago. Basically made it thicker around the perimeter. You call it perimeter weighted, also is another term for this. And it's thinner in the middle. And it does a lot to increase stability. It makes the club more forgiving. So this is going to be a lot easier to hit, this cavity back, than this blade. And we see cavity backs across different categories now. We see cavity back wedges, and there are putters that have, we don't really call them cavity back, but we see putters with perimeter weighting to make them more stable and forgiving. The third type of construction would be a hollow body iron, like this tour edge here. You see, this is a great big iron, really big toe. It looks solid across the back. It's not a cavity back where the cavity is pushed in and it's thicker around the edges. It's all one big solid thing, more like a hybrid or a wood. But this is, of course, hollow on the inside. If this was solid, it would weigh a ton. So this is a very popular type of construction used in more forgiving irons. Now, another way to categorize irons, or all clubs really, is with players, game improvement, and super game improvement categories. With irons specifically, if we're talking about players' irons, we're talking about a smaller club that is less forgiving. So with an iron, that's going to be shorter from heel to toe, a thinner top line, a thinner sole, less offset. These also are going to have more traditional lofts. They're going to be weaker lofted because the player who's using this club wants more control. They probably produce plenty of speed on their own. Switching to the other end of the spectrum, a super game improvement iron like this is almost a hybrid. These are going to be the biggest clubs. Big, massive sole, thick top line, lots of offset, long from heel to toe, big face, generally strong lofts, and lots of technology to make this really, really easy to hit. Game improvement falls somewhere in the middle, and this whole thing is a spectrum, right? Just think about it in terms of a spectrum. There are not hard lines defining each category, but game improvement irons are going to have medium thick top lines, some offset, some sole width to them. Usually these actually often have the strongest lofts because they're the most popular category and everybody wants to hit it far. But this is a club that's in the middle. It's going to be forgiving, pretty easy to hit, but not quite as big as a super game improvement iron. The other term that gets thrown around a lot is player's distance. I personally hate this term. I think that players, game improvement, super game improvement creates a nice spectrum. It's a nice, easy to understand range. Player's distance, to me, it's just something they made up so that people can feel better about playing game improvement clubs. What are the hallmarks of a player's distance club? maybe it's a little smaller, it's on the smaller side of game improvement, strong lofts, a lot of technology, but they're just trying to make it look better. Player's Distance is simply a good-looking game improvement club. But if you like the term, that's fine. Just in my opinion, it doesn't really add anything to our discussion. Again, to me, if we just think in terms of players, game improvement, super game improvement, we have a pretty clear understanding of where all our different clubs lie. And the last term I want to define is center of gravity. People will use center of gravity interchangeably with sweet spot, and that's fine. I try not to be pedantic about these things, but there is an important difference. If we take this driver, for instance, the sweet spot is somewhere on this face. It's just a point on this face where you're going to get maximum ball speed, where you're lined up with the center of gravity, and that's where you want to hit the ball, of course. The center of gravity, however, exists somewhere in 3 dimensions, especially with a driver. We have to think about front to back, left to right, up and down. So they're not really interchangeable terms, but if you want to use them that way, it's not going to hurt my feelings. So what do we need to know about CG? The big thing is there are 3 aspects of CG, and if you just know that, you're way ahead of most golfers. So if we think heel to toe, what do different CGs do? If we bury the CG all the way in the heel, that's going to make this club very draw biased. It's going to make this club want to produce a draw, which is a right to left ball flight for a right-handed player. Now, I'm not going to get into the why. That's going to be in a separate video where I talk about gear effect, but for right now, just trust me. If the CG is in the heel, this club is going to be draw biased. Conversely, if we put the CG way out here in the toe, it's going to be very fade biased. It's going to be very hard to make this club produce a draw. It's going to want to produce a fade, which is a left to right ball flight for the right-handed player. Now we also need to think about CG high and low. If the CG is way up here, we're going to produce a club that is low launching, high spinning, the opposite of what we want in a driver. Conversely, we put the CG really low. We hear low CG talk in a lot of golf clubs. Low CG is going to produce high launch and low spin. This is true in irons too, and it's why we see some clubs with thin soles and some clubs with very thick soles. With a thick sole, you have more mass low in the club head. This is going to have a very low CG, and that's great for the player who needs help getting the ball up in the air. This is going to be a high launching club because it has a low CG. A blade or a player's iron is generally going to have a higher CG. It's going to launch lower. It's going to spin more. And again, neither of those is good or bad, right or wrong for everybody. It's just what does that player type want? This player mishits the ball a lot. They're going to hit a lot of shots thin, not hitting it squarely on the face. So they want more help getting the ball up in the air so it goes farther. With this is going to give players better control over their trajectory, might give them more distance, might give them more shaping ability with that extra spin. Finally, we want to think about that CG forward and back. Again, you typically hear more manufacturers talk about a far back CG, right? Stretching that CG back with weights at the back of the head. Why do we want that? When the CG is all the way back, it makes this club more stable, less likely to twist on a mishit, so that makes it more forgiving. However, when you push that CG forward, you're often going to get better high-end performance. You're going to get better ball speed on center. You may also see less gear effect. So there are benefits to forward and back. And again, when you have players clubs, they may have a more forward CG. With a super game improvement club or a game improvement club, they're going to pull that CG back toward the rear of the head to make it more stable. And again, we see that across different categories, in irons as well. This club stretches that CG back with all this extra mass back here, this extra flange. This is a very thin club. This has no room to push the CG back. So the CG is right up against the face, lots of control here. This is much more stable on mishits because that CG is pulled further back. Now as a bonus, if we think about adjustable weights, if you understand the 3 movements of CG, you understand what these adjustable weights are for and what they want to help you do. So in this ping driver here, very simple, just kind of toe, center, and heel to produce different ball flights left to right. But some drivers will give you the ability to move the weight forward and back as well, because you may want forward for generally lower spin, higher ball speed, or you may want to pull it back for more forgiveness. I hope this has been helpful to you. Again, if there are terms you want defined, please throw them down in the comments. I'll make sure to include them in a future video. But we have videos coming up on the grips, shafts, putters, ball flight, launch monitors. We've got a lot in the works, so please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.